They called her the ugly daughter, the family embarrassment who would die alone. So her sisters played the cruelest joke imaginable. They answered a rancher's advertisement for a mail-order bride using Eliza's name and her worst photograph, expecting nothing but humiliation. What they didn't expect was a response, a train ticket west and a letter from a man who didn't want beauty. He wanted strength. Now, Eliza Carter faces an impossible choice. Stay in Missouri, where she's invisible, or board a train to the Wyoming territory to marry a complete stranger. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest transformations. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The photograph sat on the dining room table like an accusation. Eliza Carter stared at it, her own face captured in the worst possible light, chin slightly doubled, eyes half closed in an unfortunate blink, hair pulled back so severely it aged her a decade. She was 24 years old, but in this image, she looked 40 and exhausted. "Oh, this one's perfect," Caroline said, her eldest sister's voice dripping with theatrical delight. "Look at how dreadful she appears." Margaret, the middle sister, leaned over Caroline's shoulder and let out a peal of laughter that echoed through their modest Missouri farmhouse. "It's almost cruel how unflattering it is. Mother tried to throw it away twice." "That's precisely why we're using it," Caroline said, sliding the photograph into an envelope with exaggerated care. "Imagine some desperate rancher's face when he opens this and sees what he's getting." Eliza stood in the doorway of the kitchen, a dish towel still in her hands, watching her sisters orchestrate her humiliation with the casual efficiency of women who had spent years perfecting the art. She should have walked away. She should have retreated to the kitchen, to the safety of her pots and pans, and the vegetable garden that never judged her. But something kept her frozen in place, watching them seal her fate with wax and laughter. "What are you doing?" The question came out quieter than she intended. Caroline looked up, eyes bright with mischief. "Oh, Eliza, don't look so tragic. We're doing you a favor, really." "A favor?" The words tasted bitter. "There was an advertisement in the territorial newspapers," Margaret explained, her tone the same one she might use to explain something to a particularly slow child. A wealthy rancher in Wyoming, Cole Dawson, apparently quite established, seeking a practical woman for marriage. He specifically requested someone not concerned with frivolous beauty or social pretense. "We thought of you immediately," Caroline added, her smile sharp as a knife. Eliza's grip tightened on the dish towel. "You're sending my information to a stranger?" "We're giving you an opportunity you'd never have otherwise," Caroline said, her voice taking on that familiar edge of justified cruelty. "Let's be honest, Eliza. You're 24. No prospects, no suitors. Not even Benjamin Crowley looked twice at you, and he has a wandering eye and a drinking problem. But you spend your days in the kitchen and the garden like hired help," Margaret continued, her beautiful face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. "Mother and father are too kind to say it, but we all know the truth. You're becoming a burden." The words landed exactly where they were meant to, finding all the soft places Eliza had tried to protect. "This rancher wants practical," Caroline said, sealing the envelope with a flourish. "Well, you're certainly that. Plain, sturdy, good with household matters. Perfect for frontier life where no one cares about fashion or refinement." "You can't," Eliza started, but Margaret cut her off. "It's already done. We filled out the application 3 days ago. This is just the photograph to complete the package." She held up the envelope like a trophy. "Think of it as our gift to you. A chance at a life, even if it's 1,000 miles from civilization, with a man who clearly has no other options." "And when he rejects me?" Eliza's voice was steadier now, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "When he takes one look at that photograph and decides he'd rather remain a widower?" "Then at least we tried," Caroline said with a shrug. "And we'll all have a good laugh about the time we almost married off the family's plainest daughter to a desperate rancher." They were still laughing when Eliza turned and walked back into the kitchen. She stood at the sink, hands braced against the worn wooden counter, staring out at the garden she had cultivated for years. Neat rows of vegetables, carefully tended herbs, the small section of flowers she grew despite her mother's insistence that they were impractical. 24 years of being invisible. 24 years of watching her sisters collect suitors like some women collected ribbons, while she remained the daughter. People forgot to introduce at social gatherings. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. She had built up a tolerance for that over the years, developed calluses on her heart the same way her hands had calloused from work. The worst part was the small, traitorous spark of hope that flickered to life despite everything. What if the rancher did respond? What if there was a place in the world where being practical and strong mattered more than being beautiful? Eliza pressed her palm against the cool glass of the window and allowed herself one moment of dangerous possibility before crushing it back down into the safe darkness where dreams went to die. 3 weeks passed. Eliza had almost convinced herself to forget the entire incident when the letter arrived. She was in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer squash, when she heard Caroline shriek from inside the house. It was a different sound than her usual theatrical exclamations. This one carried genuine shock. Eliza straightened, wiping dirt from her hands onto her apron, and made her way inside with the resignation of someone walking toward their own execution. Her entire family was gathered in the parlor. Her father, usually absent during the day, stood by the fireplace with an expression of bewilderment. Her mother sat in her chair, a letter clutched in her hands, her face pale. Caroline and Margaret flanked her like sentries, for once silent. "Eliza," her mother said, and there was something in her voice Eliza had never heard before, something almost like respect, or perhaps fear. "There's been a response." The world tilted slightly. "A response," Eliza repeated, the words not quite making sense. Caroline thrust a thick envelope toward her, expensive paper that crackled with quality. He responded, "The rancher, Cole Dawson." Her voice was flat, drained of its usual musical mockery. "He wants to marry you." Eliza took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a letter written in strong, angular handwriting, and beneath it, a train ticket. "Miss Eliza Carter, your application reached me last week. I appreciate the honesty of your submission, both in word and image. I have no use for women who hide their true nature behind powders and pretense. I am a rancher with substantial holdings in the Wyoming territory. I lost my wife 4 years ago and am raising a 7-year-old son alone. I need a woman who understands work, who won't break under frontier conditions, and who can build a life without romantic illusions. I don't want beauty. I don't want charm. I want competence and strength of character. From your letter, you seem to possess both. If you're willing, the enclosed ticket will bring you to Cheyenne. I'll meet you there on September 15th. We'll marry the same day if we're both agreeable after meeting. If either of us decides against it, I'll provide return fare and enough money for your trouble. I'm offering honest work for honest partnership. Nothing more, nothing less. Cole Dawson." Eliza read the letter 3 times, her mind struggling to process each word. "He thinks I wrote the application," she said finally. "Of course he does," Margaret said, her voice carrying an edge of something that might have been envy. "Caroline made it sound like you were desperate for frontier life, eager to leave behind the superficial concerns of civilized society." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Apparently, that's exactly what he wanted to hear. "The train ticket is first class," her father observed, picking it up with careful fingers. "That's not an insignificant expense." "He's wealthy," Caroline said, and now there was definitely bitterness in her tone. "I looked into him. Cole Dawson owns one of the largest cattle operations in Wyoming. He supplies beef to the railroad companies. He's not some struggling homesteader. He's practically a frontier baron." "And he wants Eliza," their mother said, the words hanging in the air like an indictment. Silence fell over the parlor. Eliza stood holding the letter, feeling the weight of 4 pairs of eyes on her. For the first time in her life, she was the center of attention in her own family, and no one quite knew what to do about it. "You're not actually considering this," Caroline said finally, her composure cracking. "Eliza, it was a joke. You can't actually go to Wyoming and marry a stranger." "Why not?" The question came out before Eliza could stop it. "Because it's insane," Margaret said. "He's a widower with a child living in the middle of nowhere. You'd be trapped out there with a man you've never met, doing backbreaking work, probably dying of loneliness or childbirth, or as opposed to staying here?" Eliza's voice was quiet, but something in it made Margaret stop mid-sentence. "Staying here where I'm the family embarrassment? Where I spend my days cooking and cleaning and gardening, invisible except when someone needs to make a joke at my expense?" "Eliza," her mother started. "He doesn't want beauty or charm," Eliza continued, her eyes on the letter. "He wants honesty and strength. He wants someone who won't break." She looked up, meeting Caroline's gaze directly. You meant to humiliate me. You sent that photograph and that letter expecting him to reject it, to give you all another story about poor, pathetic Eliza. That's not, Caroline began, but the lie died on her lips. But he didn't reject it, Eliza said. He saw that photograph, the worst possible image of me, and he still sent a ticket. He still offered partnership. She folded the letter carefully. Maybe that says something about him. Or maybe it says something about what actually matters out there in the territories. Her father cleared his throat. Eliza, you don't have to do this. Whatever your sisters intended, you're under no obligation. I know, Eliza said. But what if I want to? The question hung in the air like smoke. You're being ridiculous, Caroline said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. This is wilderness, Eliza. No society, no culture, no one who knows I'm the plain daughter, Eliza finished. No one who's already decided what I'm worth before I open my mouth. She looked down at the train ticket, at the date printed in bold letters. September 15th, 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to make a decision that would change everything. That night, Eliza lay in her narrow bed in the room she had occupied for 24 years and tried to imagine what Wyoming looked like. She had seen pictures in magazines, vast plains, mountains touching impossible skies, towns that were little more than collections of wooden buildings against an endless horizon. It looked lonely. It looked harsh. It looked like freedom. She thought about Cole Dawson's letter, the directness of it. No flowery language, no false promises, just an honest proposition from a man who needed help and was willing to offer partnership in return. I don't want beauty. I don't want charm. I want competence and strength of character. For the first time in her life, someone was judging her on qualities she actually possessed. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, Eliza found her mother in the kitchen before dawn. I'm going, she said simply. Her mother's hand stilled over the bread dough she was kneading. Eliza, I've already decided. Eliza poured herself coffee with steady hands. I'm taking Mr. Dawson's offer. You don't know this man. You don't know what life is like out there. And I know what life is like here. Eliza met her mother's eyes. I'm 24 years old, Mother. In this town, that makes me a spinster, an object of pity at best, mockery at worst. You have a home here? Do I? Eliza's voice was gentle but firm. Or do I have a place where I'm tolerated as long as I'm useful and invisible? Her mother flinched. I'm not saying this to be cruel, Eliza continued. I understand how it is. Caroline and Margaret are beautiful. They'll make good marriages to prosperous men. They're the daughters you can be proud of. She set down her coffee cup. But I'm tired of apologizing for not being like them. Mr. Dawson is offering me a chance to be valued for who I am, not dismissed for who I'm not. And if he's cruel, if he's dangerous, then I'll deal with it. But staying here out of fear means I've already given up. Her mother was quiet for a long moment, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. Finally, she spoke. Your grandmother left everything she knew when she was 18, came west from Virginia with a man she'd met twice. She shaped the dough into loaves with careful precision. She always said that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one. Eliza felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. I'll help you prepare, her mother said. We have 2 weeks. That's enough time to make sure you have everything you need. The days that followed were strange. Caroline and Margaret largely avoided her, their joke having backfired in a way that left them uncertain how to respond. Her father retreated into his workshop, uncomfortable with emotions he didn't know how to process. But her mother transformed into a woman Eliza had never quite seen before. Practical, efficient, and fiercely determined to prepare her daughter for frontier life. They went through Eliza's wardrobe, sorting out what would be practical for Wyoming and what would be useless vanity. Her mother taught her things she had never bothered to teach before: how to preserve meat for long winters, how to treat common injuries when doctors were days away, how to make do with almost nothing. You're already a better cook than most women twice your age, her mother said one afternoon as they packed Eliza's trunk. And your garden skills will serve you well, but there's harder knowledge you'll need. She taught Eliza how to shoot a rifle, how to recognize dangerous weather patterns, how to deliver a calf and treat livestock ailments, how to negotiate with merchants and spot dishonest dealings. I should have taught you these things anyway, her mother admitted one evening. I let your sister's brightness blind me to your strength. On the last night before her departure, her mother gave her a small wooden box. This was your grandmother's, she said. She carried it west, and now you'll carry it. Inside was a simple gold ring, a packet of seeds, and a letter written in faded ink. For the woman brave enough to build something new, the letter read. The ring is for remembrance. The seeds are for hope. Plant them when you arrive, and remember that all great things start small. Eliza held the box, tears blurring her vision. You're stronger than you know, her mother said softly. Stronger than your sisters in the ways that matter. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. September 15th arrived with cool morning air and the smell of coming autumn. Eliza dressed in her traveling clothes, a practical dark blue dress, sturdy boots, her best coat. Her trunk sat by the door, packed with everything she owned that mattered. The family gathered to see her off, an awkward assembly on the front porch. Her father pressed money into her hand. In case you need to come home, he said gruffly. No shame in changing your mind. Caroline and Margaret stood silent, their expressions complicated mixtures of envy, confusion, and something that might have been grudging respect. I'm sorry, Caroline said finally, the words clearly difficult. This wasn't... We didn't mean for it to actually... I know, Eliza said, but maybe it's better this way. You gave me something I would never have had the courage to reach for on my own. The hired wagon arrived to take her to the train station. As her trunk was loaded, Eliza took one last look at the house where she had spent her entire life. It looked smaller than she remembered, less important. Her mother embraced her tightly. Write when you can. Let me know you're safe. I will. And Eliza? Her mother pulled back, holding her at arm's length. Make a life that's yours, not what anyone else expects. Yours. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. The wagon pulled away, and she watched her family, her sisters, her parents, the house, the town, grow smaller in the distance until they disappeared entirely. The train station in town was busier than she'd ever seen it. Eliza stood on the platform, her trunk at her feet, the ticket clutched in her gloved hand. Around her, people hurried past, salesmen with their cases, families traveling together, young men heading west to seek their fortunes. She was just another traveler, anonymous, unremarkable, free. The train arrived in a thunder of steam and steel, and Eliza climbed aboard with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The first-class car was nicer than anywhere she'd ever been. Plush seats, polished wood, windows that looked out onto a world about to change completely. As the train pulled away from the station, Eliza pressed her hand against the window and watched Missouri roll past. The familiar fields, the town she'd known all her life, the landscape of her childhood fading into memory. She was leaving everything she knew for a man she'd never met, a place she'd never seen, a life she couldn't imagine. The old Eliza, the one who had spent 24 years being invisible, would never have had the courage. But somewhere between that cruel joke and this moment, something had shifted. Her sisters had meant to humiliate her, but instead they had handed her an escape route. And Eliza had taken it. The train carried her west through the afternoon and into evening. She watched the landscape change outside her window, the gentle hills of Missouri giving way to flatter plains, the trees becoming sparser, the sky growing larger with every mile. Other passengers came and went at various stops. A few tried to make conversation, but Eliza kept to herself, her mind too full of questions and fears and fragile hopes to manage small talk. What if Cole Dawson took one look at her and regretted his offer? What if the photograph hadn't been unflattering enough, and she disappointed him even more in person? What if she wasn't strong enough for frontier life? What if she failed at the one chance she'd ever had to build something of her own? The fears circled like vultures, but beneath them was something else, a stubborn determination that had been growing stronger with every mile. She had made this choice. She had stepped onto this train knowing full well it might lead to disaster. But she had also stepped onto it knowing that staying in Missouri guaranteed a slow death of the spirit, a lifetime of being the daughter no one quite knew what to do with. At least this way, she had a chance. The train crossed into the Wyoming territory on the third day. Eliza woke early that morning and pressed her face to the window, watching the sun rise over a landscape that looked like nothing she'd ever seen. Endless plains stretched in every direction, grass rippling like water in the wind. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the season. The sky was so vast it seemed to swallow everything. an ocean of blue above an ocean of earth. It was beautiful, harsh and lonely and utterly beautiful. The train stopped at small stations throughout the day, rough wooden platforms in the middle of nowhere, towns that consisted of a handful of buildings and more hope than sense. At each stop, Eliza wondered if this was Cheyenne, if this was where her new life would begin. But the train kept moving, carrying her deeper into the territory, and with each mile, the landscape grew more raw and wild. Finally, as the afternoon sun began its descent, the conductor walked through the car. Cheyenne, next stop. 15 minutes to Cheyenne. Eliza's hands began to shake. She smoothed her dress, checked her hair, tried to calm the wild beating of her heart. In 15 minutes, she would meet Cole Dawson. In 15 minutes, she would know if she had made the biggest mistake of her life or the first real decision. The train slowed, and through the window, Eliza caught her first glimpse of Cheyenne. It was larger than the other towns they'd passed. Actual buildings, multiple streets, the organized chaos of a settlement that was becoming a city. But it was still raw, still unfinished, still a place where anything could happen. The train pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and a hiss of steam. Eliza stood on shaking legs, gathered her small traveling bag, and made her way to the exit. A porter helped with her trunk, setting it on the platform beside her. And then she was standing in Wyoming, breathing air that smelled of dust and sagebrush and possibility, surrounded by strangers in a place that was about to become home or prison. She scanned the platform, searching for a man she wouldn't recognize. And then she saw him. He stood apart from the crowd, taller than most of the men around him, wearing dark clothing and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He held himself with the stillness of someone who had learned patience the hard way. As if sensing her gaze, he looked directly at her. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the platform. Two strangers about to gamble everything on a partnership built from desperation and honesty. Then Cole Dawson began walking toward her, and Eliza's new life began. He was perhaps 10 feet away when Eliza got her first clear look at Cole Dawson's face, hard lines carved by sun and wind, a jaw that looked like it had been cut from granite, eyes the color of storm clouds. He wasn't handsome in the way the men back home were handsome. There was nothing soft or refined about him. But there was something else, something that made her breath catch. Strength, the kind that came from surviving things that would have broken lesser men. He stopped in front of her, removed his hat, and looked at her with a directness that made her want to look away. But she didn't. If this was going to work, she couldn't start by flinching. "Miss Carter?" His voice was low, rough around the edges like weathered leather. "Mr. Dawson." They stood there for a moment, two people taking measure of each other in the fading afternoon light. Eliza wondered what he saw. If the photograph had prepared him, if she was better or worse than he'd imagined. "Train was on time," he said finally. "Yes." "That's your trunk?" "It is." He gestured to a wagon hitched nearby, a sturdy vehicle that had clearly seen years of hard use. "I'll load it. There's a hotel in town where you can stay tonight. Tomorrow morning we'll go before the justice of the peace, if you're still willing." Eliza's heart hammered. "And if I'm not?" "Then I'll buy you dinner, give you money for a ticket back east, and we'll part as friends." He lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "No hard feelings either way. This is too important to build on obligation." She watched him secure the trunk in the wagon bed, his movements efficient and practiced. "You don't want to talk first? Get to know each other?" "We can talk over supper." He offered his hand to help her up onto the wagon seat. "But I figure we already know the important things. You know I'm a widower with a son and a ranch that takes all my time. I know you're practical enough to travel 1,000 miles to marry a stranger. Rest is just details." Eliza settled onto the hard wooden seat, arranging her skirts. Some people might say the details matter. Some people aren't trying to survive frontier winters. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Out here, you need to know if someone's going to stand or break when things get hard. Everything else works itself out or it doesn't." The wagon lurched forward, and Cheyenne rolled past. A mix of permanent buildings and temporary structures, board sidewalks and muddy streets, the organized chaos of a town growing faster than it could manage. "It's bigger than I expected," Eliza said. "Railroad brought people. People bring commerce. Commerce brings more people." Cole navigated around a freight wagon. 5 years ago, this was mostly tents and wishes. Now it's becoming something close to a real city. You don't sound pleased about that. Progress is fine, but it brings complications. He glanced at her. You'll see what I mean soon enough. Ranch is 2 hours northwest, far enough to avoid most of the noise. They passed a church, a general store, a hotel advertising hot baths and clean sheets. People stared as they went by, a tall rancher and a plain woman in traveling clothes, clearly strangers to each other despite sitting close enough to touch. Eliza felt their eyes on her and lifted her chin. Let them look. She'd spent her whole life being invisible or mocked. Being stared at with curiosity was almost an improvement. Cole pulled the wagon up in front of a 2-story building with a painted sign reading Continental Hotel. It wasn't fancy, but it looked solid and well-maintained. I'll get you settled, he said, climbing down. Then we'll have supper in the dining room downstairs. That work for you? Yes. He retrieved her trunk again and led her inside. The lobby was small but clean, with a desk clerk who looked at them with poorly concealed interest. Room for the lady, Cole said, his tone making it clear he wouldn't tolerate questions. Of course, Mr. Dawson. The clerk handed over a key. Room 6, top of the stairs. Cole carried her trunk up without waiting for help. The room was simple. A bed, a washstand, a single window looking out onto the street, but it was private and clean. I'll give you an hour to freshen up, Cole said, setting the trunk by the bed. Dining room at 6? I'll be there. He paused at the door, hat in his hands. Miss Carter, I want you to know there's no pressure here. If you have doubts, we can talk them through. And if you decide this isn't for you, I'll respect that. And if you decide I'm not what you need, then I'll tell you straight and make sure you get home safe. His gray eyes held hers. I don't play games with people's lives. Too much at stake for that. After he left, Eliza stood in the middle of the room and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She walked to the window and looked out at Wyoming, at the mountains in the distance, the endless sky, the rough streets below. This was real. This was happening. In less than 24 hours, she might be married to the man who had just left her room. The thought should have terrified her, and it did. But it also felt like standing at the edge of something vast and important, something that could change everything if she was brave enough to jump. She unpacked her small bag, washed her face and hands in the basin, and changed into her best dress, a deep green that her mother had insisted she bring. It wasn't fancy, but it was well made and fit her properly. When she looked in the small mirror above the washstand, she saw the same face she'd always seen, plain, unremarkable. But maybe that was all right. Maybe out here, unremarkable was exactly what she needed to be. At 6 o'clock, she made her way downstairs. The dining room was about half full, mostly men, a few families, all of them with the weathered look of people who worked hard for their living. Cole sat at a corner table watching the door. He stood when he saw her, pulled out her chair. You look nice. Thank you. The courtesy surprised her. She'd expected frontier manners to be rougher. They ordered beef stew for both of them, coffee, fresh bread that the waitress promised was made that morning, and then sat in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Tell me about your son, Eliza said finally. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Luke? He's 7. Smart as a whip, stubborn as his mother was. A pause. He's had a hard time since we lost her. Doesn't talk much anymore. Spends most of his time with the horses or reading when I can get books for him. What happened to your wife? Fever. 4 years back. Cole's voice was flat, carefully controlled. Doctor was 3 days away. By the time he got there, wasn't anything he could do. I'm sorry. Life out here is hard. People die. You accept it, or you break. He met her eyes. I need you to understand that. The ranch is remote. If something goes wrong, you can't count on quick help. You have to be able to handle things yourself. I understand. Do you? He leaned forward slightly. Miss Carter, I'm not trying to scare you off, but I won't lie about what you're getting into. The work is endless. Winters are brutal. The nearest neighbor is 8 miles away. You'll go weeks without seeing another woman. And if you can't handle solitude and hard labor, you'll grow to hate it. The stew arrived, and Eliza took a moment to gather her thoughts while the waitress fussed with their plates. Mr. Dawson, she said when they were alone again, I spent 24 years being the daughter no one noticed unless they needed something. I cooked, I cleaned, I tended gardens. I made myself useful and invisible. I know about hard work, and as for solitude, she paused. Being alone is different than being lonely. I've been lonely in rooms full of people. Maybe being alone will be easier. Cole studied her for a long moment. Your sisters really did send that application as a joke? They thought it would be funny to humiliate the plain daughter by having a stranger reject her. She took a bite of stew, found it surprisingly good. But you didn't reject me, and now here I am. Here you are. He ate in silence for a moment. What made you actually come? Most women would have torn up the ticket. Most women have better options. That's not an answer. Eliza set down her spoon. I came because I was tired of living a half-life. Because when I read your letter, I thought, here's someone who values the things I'm actually good at, who doesn't care that I'm not beautiful or charming or whatever else women are supposed to be. She met his gaze. I came because you offered me honesty, and I'd rather have honest hardship than comfortable pretense. The corner of Cole's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You might regret that when you're hauling water in January. I might, but I'll regret it on my own terms. They finished their meal with more conversation, practical discussions about the ranch, about Luke, about what Eliza's responsibilities would be. Cole was direct to the point of bluntness, but Eliza found she preferred it to the careful social dancing she was used to. One more thing, Cole said as they were finishing. The marriage certificate will be real. The partnership will be real. But the rest, he paused, choosing words carefully. I'm not looking for romance or passion or whatever storybooks promise. I need a partner who can run a household and help raise my son. If more develops over time, fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But I won't pressure you for anything beyond what we agree to. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks but held his gaze. That's fair. You'll have your own room, privacy when you need it. I'm not an easy man to live with, but I'm not cruel either. He pushed back from the table. Sleep on it tonight. If you want to go through with it, meet me in the lobby at 9 tomorrow morning. If you're not there, I'll understand. He walked her to the stairs, tipped his hat, and left. Eliza climbed to her room and sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. This was insane. Everything about it was insane. Marrying a stranger, moving to a remote ranch, becoming an instant mother to a grieving child. Any rational person would take the money and run, but she had stopped being rational the moment she boarded that train in Missouri. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Cheyenne settling in for the night. Horses, voices, the distant sound of a piano from a saloon down the street. Tomorrow she would make a choice that couldn't be unmade. Tomorrow she would become Eliza Dawson, or board a train back to being Eliza Carter, the daughter no one quite knew what to do with. She already knew which one she would choose. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of fragmented dreams. Her sisters laughing, her mother's hands kneading bread, vast plains stretching endlessly, gray eyes looking at her with something that wasn't quite warmth but wasn't quite coldness either. When she woke, dawn was breaking over Wyoming, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink she'd never seen in Missouri. Eliza rose, washed, and dressed in the same green dress she'd worn to dinner. She packed her small bag with steady hands, surprising herself with how calm she felt. At 8:30, she made her way downstairs. Cole was already in the lobby, talking with another man in rancher's clothing. He looked up when she appeared, and something in his expression eased. Miss Carter. He excused himself from his conversation and walked over. You slept well? Well enough. Had breakfast? Not yet. We'll eat after. He offered his arm. If you're ready. I am. They walked together through the morning streets of Cheyenne to a small office building. Inside, a justice of the peace sat at a desk covered in papers, looking like he'd performed this particular service 100 times before. Mr. Dawson, the justice said, standing. This is the lady? Miss Eliza Carter. Miss Carter, Justice Brennan. Brennan looked at her with sharp eyes. You understand what you're agreeing to, miss. Marriage is a legal contract, not something to enter into lightly. I understand. And you're doing this of your own free will? No coercion? My own free will. All right then. Brennan shuffled papers. I'll need 2 witnesses. Cole gestured to the hallway where the rancher he'd been talking to earlier waited with an older woman Eliza didn't recognize. Tom and Mrs. Fletcher agreed to stand for us. The ceremony was brief, barely 5 minutes of legal language and vows exchanged in voices that didn't quite shake. Eliza heard herself promise to honor and cherish a man she'd known for less than a day. She heard him promise the same. It felt surreal and absolutely real at the same time. By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Brennan looked at Cole. You may kiss your bride, if you're so inclined. Cole looked at Eliza, a question in his eyes. She nodded, barely. He kissed her, a brief formal touch of lips that lasted perhaps 2 seconds. It wasn't romantic. It was a seal on a contract. Congratulations, Brennan said, handing Cole the marriage certificate. May you build a good life together. Outside in the September sunshine, Eliza Carter, now Eliza Dawson, stood next to her new husband and tried to process what had just happened. There's a cafe 2 blocks over, Cole said. We'll get breakfast, pick up some supplies, and head to the ranch. That all right with you? Yes. The word came out steadier than she felt. Eliza. He said her name carefully, as if testing it. You can still change your mind. We can have the marriage annulled before... I'm not changing my mind. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right then, welcome to the family, Mrs. Dawson. The cafe was crowded with morning customers, but they found a table near the window. Over eggs and coffee and biscuits with honey, Cole told her more about the ranch. We run about 2,000 head of cattle. Got contracts with the railroad to supply beef. The house is solid. My father built it 20 years ago when he first settled the land. There's a main house, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, barn, stable, smokehouse, all the usual outbuildings. How many ranch hands? 5 full-time, more during branding and roundup seasons. Good men, mostly. They'll be curious about you, but they'll keep their distance if you want them to. Eliza absorbed this. And Luke? Cole's expression tightened slightly. Like I said, he doesn't talk much. His teacher says he's smart, does well with his lessons when he applies himself. But he's been closed off since his mother died. Doesn't let people in. Will he resent me for coming into his home, into his mother's place? I don't know. Cole's honesty was brutal, but appreciated. Maybe. Probably. But he needs a woman's influence, needs someone who can give him the kind of attention I can't. I'm good with cattle and land. I'm not good with... He gestured vaguely. Feelings, gentleness, the things a child needs. You love him, though. Oh, more than anything in this world, which is why I need help. I can teach him to ride and rope and run a ranch, but there's more to raising a person than that. After breakfast, they spent an hour at the general store. Cole moved through it with the efficiency of someone who'd made this trip 100 times, pointing out things Eliza would need. Winter coats, you'll want 2. Gets colder than you're used to. Boots, practical ones. Gloves, scarves. He added items to the growing pile on the counter. Mrs. Henderson makes soap at the ranch, but you'll want your own toiletries. Medicine cabinet stocked, but if there's anything specific you need, now's the time. Eliza added a few items: fabric for sewing, thread, needles, seeds for next spring's garden. The storekeeper, a round woman with knowing eyes, watched them with barely concealed curiosity. Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Dawson, she said as she tallied the purchases. We were all wondering if you'd ever, well, the lady is very fortunate. I'm the fortunate one, Mrs. Palmer, Cole said evenly. My wife has traveled a long way to help me build a life. That takes more courage than most people have. The casual way he said, my wife, sent a strange flutter through Eliza's chest. They loaded the supplies into the wagon, and then Cheyenne was behind them, and they were heading into open country. The landscape was overwhelming in its vastness. Eliza had thought she understood space, but Missouri had trees, hills, boundaries. This was different. This was earth stretching to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the distant mountains and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a creek bed. It's so open, she said. Some people can't stand it. Makes them feel too small. Cole kept his eyes on the rutted track that served as a road. Others find it freeing. Which are you? I was born here. It's the only thing I know. He glanced at her. Which will you be? Eliza looked out at the endless plains, the sky so big it seemed impossible. I don't know yet. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The sun climbed higher, warming the air. Eliza watched hawks circling overhead, saw antelope in the distance, noticed how the grass changed color in the wind like water. My wife, Sarah, hated it at first, Cole said eventually. She came from Denver, thought she could handle frontier life. First winter nearly broke her. But she stayed. She did. Found her way through it. Made the house a home, raised Luke, built friendships with the other ranch wives, even though they were miles apart. His voice carried old pain. She was stronger than she looked. I'm sorry you lost her. So am I. He was quiet for a moment. But life moves forward whether you're ready or not. And Luke needs more than a father who's married to his work. Is that what I am? A solution to a problem? Cole considered the question seriously. You're a partner in building something. Problem, solution. Those are too simple. This is about two people who need something working together to create it. That fair enough? It's honest. It's all I know how to be. Another hour passed. The landscape began to change subtly. Gentle rises, more creeks, distant shapes that Cole identified as the ranch's northern boundary markers. Almost there, he said. The house is just over that rise. Eliza's heart began to pound again. In a few minutes, she would see her new home, meet her new son, begin a life that was completely unknown. The wagon crested the hill, and there it was. The ranch spread out below them, a substantial two-story house painted white, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Cattle dotted the fields beyond. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth inside. It was isolated and stark and somehow beautiful in its practical simplicity. What do you think? Cole asked. It's not what I expected. Better or worse? Eliza studied the scene, the house that would be hers, the land stretching in all directions, the mountains standing guard in the distance. Different, but good different. As they approached, a boy emerged from the barn, small for 7, with dark hair and eyes that were too old for his face. He watched the wagon approach with the wariness of a wild creature. That's Luke, Cole said quietly. The wagon stopped in front of the house. Cole climbed down and went to his son, crouching to his level. Luke, this is Eliza. She's going to be living with us now. She's my wife. Your new mother. The boy's expression didn't change. He looked at Eliza with those two old eyes, weighing and measuring. Eliza climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride. She approached slowly, the way she might approach a frightened animal. Hello, Luke, she said. It's nice to meet you. He didn't respond, just stared at her with an intensity that was unnerving. He doesn't talk much, Cole reminded her. That's all right, Eliza said, keeping her voice gentle. I don't need words to know a person, and we'll have plenty of time to get to know each other. Luke's eyes flickered, something that might have been curiosity or might have been distrust, and then he turned and walked back toward the barn without a word. Cole sighed. I'm sorry. It's fine, Eliza said. He's lost his mother, and now a stranger is here claiming that role. He has every right to be cautious. She looked at the house. Show me inside? His front door opened into a large main room. Fireplace at one end, dining table, comfortable furniture that had seen better days. Everything was clean but sparse, functional, without decoration. Kitchen through there, Cole said, pointing. Bedrooms upstairs. Your room will be the one at the end of the hall. It was Sarah's sewing room, but I cleared it out. He set her trunk down. I'll let you get settled. I've got work to do before dinner. What would you like for dinner? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Whatever you can manage. Pantry's stocked. Mrs. Henderson, she's the wife of one of my ranch hands, usually leaves bread and preserves. But you don't have to. Not today, you've had a long journey. I'd rather stay busy, Eliza said. It'll help me feel useful. Cole nodded slowly. All right then. Dinner around 6? I'll be ready. After he left, Eliza stood in the middle of her new home and let the reality settle over her. She was married, she was in Wyoming, she was responsible for a house, a child, a life she hadn't imagined a month ago. And she was, for the first time she could remember, exactly where she chose to be. She started with the kitchen. The room was larger than she expected, with a cast-iron stove that had seen years of use, a deep sink with a hand pump, shelves lined with preserves and dry goods. Someone, Mrs. Henderson presumably, had left fresh bread wrapped in cloth and a pot of stew still warm on the back of the stove. Eliza explored the pantry, taking inventory. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, dried beans, preserved vegetables, smoked meat hanging from hooks. Enough to feed a family through winter, organized with the precision of someone who understood scarcity. She found potatoes in a cellar bin, onions, carrots stored in sand. The garden outside the kitchen door was past its prime, but showed signs of careful tending earlier in the season. The skeletal remains of tomato plants, dried herb stalks, a patch of hardy greens still producing. This was good. She could work with this. Eliza tied on an apron she found hanging by the door and began to cook. Not because she had to, the stew would have been adequate, but because cooking was familiar, and familiarity felt like solid ground in a world that had shifted beneath her feet. She made biscuits from memory, her hands moving through the motions her mother had taught her years ago. She put together a simple apple crisp from dried fruit she found in the pantry, sweetened with honey and topped with oats and butter. She brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint, the way frontier men seemed to prefer it. While the food cooked, she explored the rest of the house. The main room showed signs of masculine neglect, dust on surfaces, newspapers stacked haphazardly, nothing decorative or soft to break the austere practicality. Upstairs, she found Cole's room at one end of the hall. The door opened to reveal a space as spare as a monk's cell. Luke's room was across from it, filled with the chaos of childhood. Books scattered on the floor, clothes draped over a chair, a collection of rocks and feathers on the windowsill. Her room was at the far end, separated from the others by the width of the hallway. Someone had made up the bed with clean linens, placed a pitcher and basin on the dresser, hung curtains at the window. It was impersonal but not unwelcoming. Eliza unpacked her trunk, hanging dresses in the wardrobe, arranging her few personal items on the dresser. The wooden box her mother had given her went on the bedside table. She opened it, looked at her grandmother's ring and the packet of seeds. "Plant them when you arrive," her grandmother's letter had said. "Remember that all great things start small. Tomorrow." Tomorrow she would find a place for a garden and plant something that would grow roots here, just as she needed to. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. In the distance she could hear men's voices, the lowing of cattle, the everyday sounds of a working ranch. This was real. This was her life now. Downstairs, she checked on dinner, set the table with plates she found in the cupboard, arranged everything the way she might for her family back in Missouri. Except this wasn't Missouri, and these people weren't her family. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At 6 o'clock, Cole came through the door with Luke trailing behind him. Both were dusty from the day's work, and Cole looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Smells good," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I hope it's all right. I found everything in the pantry. You didn't have to go to this trouble." "I wanted to." Eliza gestured to the table. "Should I call the ranch hands? They eat in the bunkhouse mostly. This is just us." Cole looked at Luke. "Go wash up." The boy disappeared without a word. "Is he always this silent?" Eliza asked quietly. "Not always. Sometimes he talks to the horses. Sometimes I catch him reading to himself. But with people—" Cole pulled off his hat, ran a hand through dark hair streaked with premature gray. "The doctor in Cheyenne said it's his way of protecting himself. That he'll come out of it when he feels safe again." "And does he? Feel safe?" "I don't know. I hope so. But I don't know how to reach him." Luke returned, his face and hands scrubbed clean. The three of them sat at the table in awkward silence. Eliza served the stew, the biscuits, poured coffee for Cole, and milk for Luke from a pitcher she'd found in the cold cellar. Cole took a bite, and something in his expression shifted. "This is good, really good." "Thank you." Sarah was a decent cook, but she never quite got the hang of biscuits, too impatient with the dough. He took another, slathered it with butter. "These are perfect." Eliza felt an unexpected warmth at the compliment. She glanced at Luke, who was eating methodically, his eyes on his plate. "Do you like biscuits, Luke?" The boy didn't respond, but he reached for a second one. "That's his way of saying yes," Cole said. "He's got a hollow leg when it comes to bread." They ate in relative silence, but it wasn't entirely uncomfortable. Eliza watched the way Cole and Luke moved around each other. The father's careful attention, the son's studied independence. There was love there, but also a chasm neither seemed to know how to cross. When Luke finished, he looked at his father. Cole nodded, and the boy disappeared upstairs without a word. He has lessons to finish, Cole explained. Teacher brings assignments once a week, picks them up the next. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. I could help him, if he'd let me. You know teaching? I'm educated enough, and I like books. Eliza began clearing the table. If it would help. Cole stood, started to help with the dishes. You don't have to. Neither do you. But if we're partners, we might as well start acting like it. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his hard face into something almost boyish. Fair enough. They worked together in the kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Cole washed, Eliza dried, and put away. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible. It's beautiful here, Eliza said. The sky, I mean. Wait until winter. Sky gets so clear you can see every star that ever existed. Cole handed her a plate. Can be overwhelming if you're not used to it, all that vastness. I think I'll like it. We'll see. He drained the dishwater, wiped down the sink. First winter here is always the hardest. You're isolated, you're cold. You start questioning every decision that brought you to this place. Speaking from experience? My mother, she came from Philadelphia. City woman, not prepared for frontier life. He hung up the towel. She lasted 2 winters before she packed up and left, went back east and never looked back. And your father? Stayed here. Raised me and my brother on his own. We turned out fine, mostly. Cole leaned against the counter. Point is, if you start feeling trapped or desperate, tell me. Don't let it build until you can't stand it anymore. I will. I mean it, Eliza. I need you to be honest with me about how you're handling things. This arrangement only works if we can talk straight with each other. She met his eyes. Then I need the same from you. If I'm doing something wrong, if I'm not meeting your expectations, I need to know. Deal. They shook hands like business partners, but this time the touch lingered for a moment longer than necessary. That night, Eliza lay in her bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. The house creaked in the wind. Somewhere outside, a coyote called, and others answered. The vastness Cole had mentioned pressed against the windows, and for a moment she felt the weight of her isolation. She was the only woman for miles, the only person in this house who didn't belong to the land and the life already established here. An outsider trying to find her place in a world that had been running fine without her. But she'd known it would be hard. She'd chosen hard over comfortable pretense. Eliza pulled her grandmother's quilt closer and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. The next morning arrived with weak sunlight and the smell of coffee. Eliza woke disoriented for a moment before remembering. Wyoming, the ranch, her new life. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs. Cole was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a ledger spread before him. He looked up when she entered. Morning. Coffee's hot if you want it. Thank you. She poured herself a cup, added sugar from the bowl on the table. You're up early. Ranch doesn't sleep. Neither do I, mostly. He gestured to the ledger. Account books. Trying to figure out if we can afford another bull for breeding stock. Eliza looked over his shoulder at the neat columns of numbers. You keep meticulous records. Have to. Railroad contracts are competitive. One mistake in the books, one missed shipment, and they'll find someone else. He took a sip of coffee. You know anything about bookkeeping? Some. I manage the household accounts back home. Think you could handle ranch books? I hate this part, but it has to be done. I could try. Good. That's one more thing off my plate. He closed the ledger. Luke will be up soon. He usually has oatmeal for breakfast. There's bacon in the smokehouse if you want to make something more substantial. I'll take care of it. Cole stood stretched. I'll be out checking the north pasture. Won't be back until afternoon. Mrs. Henderson will probably come by around 10. She usually does on Thursdays. She's good people, but she talks a lot. Fair warning. After he left, Eliza made breakfast. Luke appeared silently, ate his oatmeal without comment, and then retreated to his room. She could hear him moving around upstairs, the quiet sounds of a child trying not to be noticed. She was cleaning up the breakfast dishes when a knock came at the door. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a robust woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp, kind eyes. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. "You must be the new Mrs. Dawson," she said, looking Eliza up and down with frank assessment. "I'm Martha Henderson. My husband Ben works for Cole. I heard there was a wedding. Please come in." Eliza stepped aside. Martha entered with the confidence of someone who had been in this house many times before. She set her basket on the table, uncovered it to reveal fresh eggs and a jar of honey. "Thought you might need these. Getting settled is always easier with a few extra supplies." She looked around the kitchen. "You've been cooking. I can smell it. Biscuits?" "Yesterday for dinner." "Cole loves good biscuits. Sarah never could get them right, bless her heart." Martha pulled out a chair and sat without invitation. "I took care of this house after Sarah passed. Made sure Cole and Luke didn't starve, kept things clean. But I'm glad you're here now. A house needs a woman's touch." Eliza poured coffee for both of them, sensing this was going to be a longer visit than she'd anticipated. "Cole's a good man," Martha continued. "Hard worker, honest, treats his people fair, but he's been closed off since Sarah died. Stopped going to town socials, stopped visiting neighbors, just worked and took care of Luke and nothing else." "How did Sarah die?" "He said it was fever. Scarlet fever. Came on fast and mean. Luke caught it too, but he pulled through. Sarah didn't." Martha's face softened with memory. "She was a sweet thing. Too delicate for this life, really, but she tried. She loved Cole something fierce, and she loved that boy even more. It must have been hard for all of them. Harder than you can imagine. Luke stopped talking the day they buried her, just went silent, like he took all his words and locked them away." Martha studied Eliza. "Cole's hoping you can reach him. The boy needs a mother." "I'm not his mother." "No, but you could be. If you're patient, if you're kind." Martha sipped her coffee. "Children know when someone's trying to replace what they lost versus trying to build something new. You do the second one, you might have a chance." They talked for another hour. Martha filled her in on ranch politics, which hands were reliable, which needed watching, when to expect the seasonal workers for Roundup. She explained the social structure of the scattered ranching community, who was feuding with whom, which families were struggling and which were thriving. "There's a dance in town next month," Martha said as she prepared to leave. "Fall social, everyone goes. It'll be your first time meeting the community properly." "I'm not much for dancing." "Nobody is, really, but it's how we stay connected out here. You'll want to go, show your face, let people know you're part of the ranch now." Martha patted her hand. "They'll judge you. Can't help that. But they'll also accept you eventually if you prove you're made of strong enough stuff." After Martha left, Eliza stood in the quiet kitchen and felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just Cole's wife. She was the new Mrs. Dawson, and there was apparently a role to fill, a community to win over, a child to somehow reach. She went upstairs and knocked softly on Luke's door. No answer. "Luke, it's Eliza. May I come in?" Silence. She tried the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside, Luke sat on the floor surrounded by books, reading with fierce concentration. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Eliza said. "I wanted to ask if you needed help with your lessons." He looked up, those two old eyes assessing her. "Your father said you're studying arithmetic and reading. I'm fairly good at both, if you'd like someone to work with." Luke stared at her for a long moment, then went back to his book. Eliza stood there, uncertain. Should she leave? Should she push? Then she noticed what he was reading, a book about horses, filled with detailed illustrations. "I don't know much about horses," she said, sitting down on the floor a few feet away from him. "I grew up in a town where we mostly had cart horses. Nothing fancy." Luke's eyes flickered toward her, then back to the book. "But I'd like to learn. The horses here seem important to the ranch." Another glance. "Maybe you could teach me sometime, if you wanted to." Luke turned a page, but Eliza noticed his attention wasn't fully on the book anymore. "I'm not trying to be your mother," she said quietly. "I know you had a mother, and I know you miss her. I can't replace her, and I won't try. But I'd like to be your friend, if you'll let me." The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. It was the smallest of changes, but Eliza noticed it. She stood. I'll be downstairs if you need anything, and if you change your mind about the lessons, just let me know. She was at the door when Luke spoke for the first time. Chess. His voice was small, rusty from disuse. Eliza turned. What? I'm studying chess for my arithmetic. Mr. Patterson says chess teaches strategy and numbers. He didn't look at her, but he was talking. Do you know chess? My father taught me when I was young. We have a board, in the parlor. Papa doesn't like to play anymore. Would you like to play with me? Luke nodded, just barely. After lunch, then? Another nod. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Eliza spent the rest of the morning exploring the ranch grounds. The barn was massive, filled with the sweet smell of hay and horses. She found the smokehouse, the chicken coop where a dozen hens scratched and pecked, the cold cellar dug into the hillside where milk and butter stayed fresh. Everything was well maintained but showed signs of being run by men alone, functional without any softness or beauty. The house had no flowers, no curtains beyond the bare minimum, nothing decorative to break the endless practicality. She thought about her mother's garden back in Missouri, the way a few flowers had transformed a simple yard into something welcoming. Maybe she could do something similar here when spring came. For lunch, she made sandwiches from the bread Martha had brought. Luke came down without being called, ate quietly, and then retrieved the chessboard from the parlor. They set it up on the kitchen table in the sunlight streaming through the window. You can be white, Luke said. White goes first. They played slowly, Luke concentrating fiercely on each move. He was good, better than Eliza had expected for a 7-year-old. She had to actually think about her strategy instead of just letting him win. Where did you learn to play like this? She asked after he captured her bishop with a clever knight move. Mama taught me, before she got sick. His voice was still quiet, but steadier now. She said chess is like life. You have to think 3 moves ahead. She was right. She was right about lots of things. Luke moved his rook. Check. Eliza studied the board, found a way out, moved her king to safety. They played in silence for a while, the only sound the click of pieces on the board and the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Do you miss your home? Luke asked suddenly. Sometimes, but I didn't belong there. Not really. Why not? My sisters were beautiful and charming, and I was neither. I spent most of my life feeling invisible. Luke looked up from the board. I feel invisible sometimes too. Do you? Papa works all the time. The ranch hands are nice, but they don't really talk to me. Mrs. Henderson is kind, but she's not... He paused. She's not Mama. No one will ever be your mama, Eliza said gently. But that doesn't mean other people can't care about you in different ways. Luke was quiet, processing this. Then he moved his queen. Checkmate. Eliza looked at the board, saw how neatly he'd trapped her. Well played. You're very good at this. Mama said I was. For the first time, the ghost of a smile crossed his face. She said I was good at lots of things, but I just didn't know it yet. She was right about that, too. That afternoon, when Cole returned from checking the north pasture, he found Eliza and Luke in the kitchen. She was showing him how to make bread, and the boy's hands were covered in flour as he kneaded the dough with intense concentration. Cole stopped in the doorway, watching. Luke looked up, saw his father, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite happiness, but something lighter than the grief that usually shadowed him. We're making bread, Luke said. It was the first time Cole had heard his son volunteer information in months. I can see that. Cole met Eliza's eyes over Luke's head, and she saw surprise there, and something that might have been gratitude. That night at dinner, the silence was less oppressive. Luke still didn't talk much, but he didn't withdraw into himself the way he usually did. And when Eliza suggested another chess game after supper, he nodded eagerly. Cole watched them play, sitting by the fire with his account books, occasionally glancing up from the numbers to observe his son and his new wife bent over the chessboard. After Luke went to bed, Cole found Eliza in the kitchen putting away the last of the dishes. Thank you, he said. For what? For whatever you did today. I haven't seen Luke that engaged in anything since, in a long time. We just played chess and made bread. It's more than that. The Cole leaned against the doorframe. He talked to you, really talked. He hasn't done that with anyone in months. He's a smart boy. He just needed someone to meet him where he is instead of where everyone thinks he should be. Cole was quiet for a moment. Sarah used to say something similar, that Luke needed to be understood, not fixed. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. He pushed off from the doorframe. I'm glad you're here, Eliza. I know this arrangement is strange, and probably not what you imagined when you dreamed about marriage, but I'm glad it's you who came through that door with me yesterday. So am I. He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. If you need anything, for the house, for yourself, anything at all, just tell me. I want you to feel like this is your home, not just a place you're staying. I will. After he left, Eliza stood in the kitchen of her new home and felt something settle into place. It wasn't happiness exactly, and it certainly wasn't the romantic love the storybooks promised, but it was something real and solid. The beginning of partnership, the first fragile threads of connection being woven between three people who needed each other in different ways. The days began to develop a rhythm. Eliza woke early, made breakfast, managed the house while Cole worked the ranch. Luke did his lessons, helped where he could, and gradually began opening up in small, careful increments. Some days he was talkative, sharing stories about the horses or facts he'd learned from his books. Other days he was silent again, withdrawn into the protected space inside himself. Eliza learned not to push. She simply made herself available, for chess games, for lessons, for quiet companionship, and slowly the boy began to trust her. Mrs. Henderson visited twice more, bringing news from town and teaching Eliza the rhythms of frontier life. The other ranch hands' wives stopped by, curious about the new Mrs. Dawson, assessing whether she would fit into their scattered community. Eliza met each visitor with quiet competence, serving coffee and cake, answering questions without revealing too much. She could feel them judging her plain face, her practical manner, her Missouri accent, but she also felt something else. A cautious acceptance. She was Cole Dawson's wife now, and that meant something in this community. 2 weeks after her arrival, the first real test came. Cole had been gone since before dawn, riding to Cheyenne for supplies and business meetings. Luke was at his lessons when a ranch hand came running to the house, his face tight with worry. Mrs. Dawson, we've got a problem. One of the cattle got tangled in wire fence up near the creek. She's hurt bad, and Ben needs help getting her free. Do you know anything about livestock? Eliza's heart jumped, but she kept her voice steady. I'll do what I can. Luke, stay here. She followed the ranch hand to where several men were gathered around a cow that had torn herself trying to escape barbed wire. The animal was bleeding, panicking, making the situation worse with every movement. Ben Henderson looked up when he saw her. Mrs. Dawson, I hate to ask, but we need someone to calm her while we cut the wire. Cole usually, tell me what to do. Ben showed her how to approach the frightened animal, where to place her hands, how to use her voice to soothe. Eliza had never worked with cattle before, but she'd dealt with frightened creatures in her life. Fear was fear, whether human or animal. She spoke quietly to the cow, kept her hands steady while the men cut away the wire. When the animal finally broke free, Eliza helped clean and bandage the worst wounds with supplies from the ranch medical kit. The men watched her work with something like surprise. You did good, Mrs. Dawson, Ben said when it was over. Real good. Most city women would have fainted at the blood. I'm not most city women. Word of the incident spread through the ranch. That evening, when Cole returned, 3 different hands mentioned it to him before he even reached the house. He found Eliza in the kitchen, her dress still stained with blood and dirt despite her efforts to clean it. Heard you had some excitement today, he said. A cow got hurt. I helped. Ben said you were calm as anything, like you'd been working cattle all your life. I was terrified, Eliza admitted. But someone had to help, and I was there. Cole looked at her for a long moment. You keep surprising me. Good surprises or bad surprises? Good ones. He smiled. Definitely good ones. October arrived with crisp mornings and the smell of wood smoke. The aspens in the distant mountains turned gold, and the cattle began their slow migration to lower pastures. The ranch settled into the rhythms of preparation for winter, mending fences, stockpiling hay, preserving the last of the harvest. Eliza had been at the ranch for 6 weeks, and in that time, something fundamental had shifted. The house no longer felt like a place she was visiting. It felt like hers. She had claimed it in small ways. Curtains she'd sewn from fabric bought in town now softened the harsh light in the parlor. Herbs dried from hooks in the kitchen, filling the air with sage and thyme. The vegetable garden she'd planted from her grandmother's seeds showed the first brave shoots of winter greens. Small changes, but they transformed the house from a bachelor's dwelling into a home. Luke had changed too. He spoke more now, though still sparingly. He sought her out for lessons, for chess games, for the quiet companionship of someone who didn't expect him to be anything other than himself. Some mornings she would find him in the kitchen before dawn, reading by lamplight, and they would share breakfast in comfortable silence before the day's work began. Cole watched these transformations with something Eliza couldn't quite name, gratitude, certainly. But there was something else in the way he looked at her now, something that made her heart beat faster when she caught him staring. The fall social Martha had mentioned loomed on the calendar. Eliza had been dreading it, but Cole insisted they attend. "People need to meet you properly," he said one evening over supper. "You're part of this community now, part of this ranch. They need to know who you are. They'll judge me. They'll judge you whether you show up or not. Might as well let them do it to your face so you can prove them wrong." The night of the social, Eliza dressed in her best dress, deep blue with simple trim, nothing fancy but well made. She studied herself in the mirror and saw what she always saw, a plain woman with unremarkable features, but her eyes were clearer now, less haunted by the weight of being invisible. Wyoming had given her something Missouri never had, the freedom to exist without apology. Cole was waiting downstairs in a suit that looked uncomfortable on his rancher's frame, but he'd made the effort, and Eliza appreciated it. "You look nice," he said, and there was sincerity in his voice. "So do you." Luke bounded down the stairs, excited despite his usual reserve. Martha Henderson had agreed to watch him during the adult portions of the evening, but he would get to attend the dinner beforehand. The ride to town was quiet, the wagon rattling over rutted roads in the gathering dusk. When they arrived at the community hall, it was already crowded with ranching families from the surrounding territory, people who had traveled hours just for a few hours of social contact. Inside, the hall had been decorated with fall leaves and bunting. Tables lined one wall, already laden with food. A small group of musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. The air buzzed with conversation and laughter, the sound of people starved for company. Cole placed his hand on the small of Eliza's back, guiding her through the crowd. People turned to look, some with curiosity, some with barely concealed assessment. She felt their eyes taking her measure, comparing her to Sarah, wondering what Cole Dawson had been thinking when he married this plain woman from Missouri. Martha Henderson appeared like a guardian angel, swooping in with her husband Ben. "There you are. Come, let me introduce you properly." The next hour was a blur of names and faces. Eliza met ranchers and their wives, merchants from town, the teacher who brought Luke his lessons. Some were warm, others coolly polite. All were curious. "You're managing the Dawson place well enough?" asked Mrs. Thornton, a severe woman who owned the neighboring ranch with her husband. "I'm learning. It's a hard life out here. Not everyone's cut out for it. I'm finding that hard suits me better than easy ever did." Mrs. Thornton's eyes sharpened with something like respect. "We'll see. Winter hasn't hit yet." During dinner, Eliza sat between Cole and Martha, grateful for familiar faces. Luke was across the table, animated in a way she rarely saw, talking with other children about horses and books. "He's different," Cole said quietly, watching his son. "Since you came. More like he used to be. He just needed someone who understood that grief doesn't have a timeline. Sarah would have liked you." The words came out rough, as if they'd cost him something to say. "She would have appreciated how you've taken care of him, of both of us." Eliza didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply placed her hand over his where it rested on the table. He turned his palm up, threading his fingers through hers, and they sat like that while conversation flowed around them. After dinner, the tables were cleared and the music began. Couples moved onto the floor, and Eliza felt a spike of anxiety. She had never been a good dancer. Her sisters had been graceful and light on their feet, while she had been awkward and heavy. "I should warn you," she said to Cole, "I'm terrible at dancing." "Good. So am I." He stood, offered his hand. "But we should probably make an appearance. People will talk if we don't." The dance was a simple waltz, but Eliza still managed to step on Cole's feet twice in the first minute. She mumbled an apology, face burning with embarrassment. Relax, Cole said, his hand firm on her waist. No one's watching that closely. But they were. Eliza could feel eyes on them. The new Mrs. Dawson dancing with her husband, the practical marriage on display for community assessment. I'm making a fool of myself, she whispered. You're doing fine. Just follow my lead and stop thinking so hard. Gradually, she relaxed into the rhythm. Cole was a better dancer than he'd claimed, moving with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. And there was something unexpectedly intimate about being held like this, swaying to music under the warm lights while people watched. See? Cole said. Not so terrible. When the song ended, he didn't immediately release her. For a moment, they stood there on the edge of the dance floor, his hand still at her waist, and something passed between them. A recognition of the partnership they were building, the life taking shape in the space between obligation and choice. The spell broke when a man approached them. He was well dressed for the frontier, with the bearing of someone who thought highly of himself. Dawson, he said, his tone carrying an edge. I see you've brought your new bride. Garrett. Cole's voice went cool. This is my wife, Eliza. Eliza, Thomas Garrett. He owns the Triple G Ranch south of us. Garrett took Eliza's hand, held it longer than necessary. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Dawson. I was sorry to hear about your marriage. I had hoped to make Cole an offer on some of his land, but I suppose family considerations come first now. What offer? Eliza asked. Nothing that concerns you, I'm sure. Ranch business. Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I imagine a woman from back east might appreciate the financial security of selling off those difficult northern sections. They're more trouble than they're worth, really. Cole's jaw tightened. The northern sections aren't for sale. I told you that last month. Circumstances change. You have a family to consider now, responsibilities beyond just stubborn pride. My answer hasn't changed. Well, Garrett released Eliza's hand. Think it over. I'm prepared to be generous. It would set you up quite comfortably, especially with a new wife to provide for. After he left, Cole was tense beside her. I apologize for that. What was he talking about? Garrett's been trying to buy part of my land for 2 years. The northern sections have water rights he wants. I've refused every offer. Cole's hand was tight on her elbow as he guided her away from the dance floor. He thinks now that I'm married again, I might be more motivated to sell. Thinks you'll pressure me to take the easy money. Will you? Sell, I mean. No, that land has been in my family for 20 years. It's Luke's inheritance. I'm not selling it to line Thomas Garrett's pockets. Eliza heard the steel in his voice, the deep-rooted principle beneath the words. Good. Don't. He looked at her, surprised. You're not even curious about how much money he's offering. I didn't come here for money. I came here for a life, and you can't build a life on land you've sold away for convenience. Something in Cole's expression softened. No, you can't. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of more dancing, more conversations with curious neighbors, more assessment and judgment, but Eliza found she cared less about their opinions with each passing hour. She had Cole's respect and Luke's gradual trust. The rest would come or it wouldn't. On the ride home, Luke fell asleep in the back of the wagon, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. Cole and Eliza sat in comfortable silence, watching stars multiply in the vast darkness above. You did well tonight, Cole said eventually. I survived it anyway. More than that. You held your own. People will talk, they always do, but they'll respect you. That's what matters out here. What about Garrett? Will he cause trouble? Probably. He's used to getting what he wants. Cole's hands were steady on the reins. But he doesn't scare me. I've dealt with worse. When they reached the ranch, Cole carried the sleeping Luke inside, while Eliza stoked the fire against the night chill. The house was dark and quiet, filled with the peace that came after a long day. Cole returned from putting Luke to bed and found her standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. You should get some rest, he said. I will. She gestured at the view. I wanted to look at it for a moment. It's beautiful at night. He came to stand beside her. It is. They stood there together, watching shadows play across the rangeland, and Eliza felt the weight of all the walls between them, the careful distance they'd maintained, the boundaries of their practical arrangement. Cole, she said quietly, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it, bringing me here? He was quiet for a long moment. No, never. Do you regret coming? No, but I wonder sometimes if this is enough, this arrangement we have. Enough for what? Eliza struggled to find the right words. Enough for a life. Enough for whatever we're building here. Cole turned to face her fully. In the dim light from the dying fire, his features were shadowed, hard to read. What do you want it to be, Eliza? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. I don't know, she admitted. I just know it's becoming more than I expected. More than a practical partnership. For me, too. The admission was quiet, but it shifted something fundamental. They stood there in the darkness, closer than they'd been since their awkward kiss at the wedding, and Eliza could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his calloused hand. I haven't been fair to you, he said. I brought you here with promises of partnership and respect, but I've kept you at arm's length because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of needing you. Of letting someone in again and losing them. His thumb brushed across her cheek. Sarah's death nearly destroyed me. I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone that close again. And now? Now I'm starting to realize that protecting myself means losing something that could be good, something that could be real. Eliza closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I'm afraid too, of not being enough, of disappointing you. You could never... Cole stopped, started again. Eliza, you've been more than I had any right to hope for. You've brought life back into this house, reached my son when I couldn't, stood beside me like a true partner. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. Not as an obligation, but as... She kissed him before he could finish, standing on her toes to press her lips to his. It wasn't like their wedding kiss, formal and distant. This was real, full of all the things they hadn't said, all the feelings they'd been carefully avoiding. Cole pulled her closer, one hand tangled in her hair, the other at her waist. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and careful distance burning away in the heat of sudden connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Eliza rested her forehead against his chest. I didn't plan that, she whispered. I'm glad you didn't. His arms tightened around her. We should probably talk about this. Figure out what it means. Do we have to? Right now? No. He kissed the top of her head. But eventually. That night, Eliza lay in her bed and touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of that kiss. Everything had changed in a single moment. The careful boundaries they'd established, the safe distance they'd maintained. She had thought she could manage a marriage of partnership without risking her heart. She'd been wrong. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with the smell of coming snow in the air. Eliza woke early and found Cole already in the kitchen, making coffee with the awkwardness of someone unused to the task. Morning, he said, and there was uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there before. Morning. They moved around each other carefully, the memory of last night's kiss making everything feel different and strange. About last night, Cole started. We don't have to. I think we do. He poured coffee for both of them, handed her a cup. I meant what I said, about wanting you here, about this becoming more than our arrangement. But I need to know where you stand, what you want. Eliza wrapped her hands around the warm cup, gathering courage. I want this to be real, not just a partnership or a practical marriage. I want... She paused, searching for honesty. I want what you lost with Sarah. Not to replace it, but to build something new, something ours. That's what I want too. Cole's gray eyes held hers. But it scares the hell out of me. Me too. So what do we do? Maybe we just take it one day at a time, stop holding back so much. See where it leads. Cole nodded slowly. I can do that. The sound of small footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Luke appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his hair standing up in all directions. Good morning, Eliza said, grateful for the distraction. Morning. Luke looked between them, his young face registering something different in the air. Are you and Papa fighting? No, Cole said quickly. Why would you think that? You both look weird. Despite the tension, Eliza laughed. We're not fighting. We're just talking about grown-up things. Boring grown-up things or interesting grown-up things? Boring, Cole said. At the same time, Eliza said, interesting. Luke looked between them again, confused, then shrugged and headed for the pantry. Can I have oatmeal? I'll make it, Eliza said, grateful for the return to routine. The day unfolded with the usual tasks, but there was a new awareness between Cole and Eliza. Their hands would brush, reaching for the same item, and neither would pull away immediately. They caught each other's eyes across rooms and held the gaze a moment longer than necessary. Small things, but they added up to something significant. That afternoon, while Luke was at his lessons and Cole was working with the ranch hands, a rider approached the house. Eliza watched from the window as Thomas Garrett dismounted and tied his horse to the post. She opened the door before he could knock. Mr. Garrett, my husband is in the north pasture. Actually, Mrs. Dawson, it's you I came to see. His smile was practiced, charming in a way that felt calculated. May I come in? Every instinct told her to refuse, but frontier hospitality had its rules. Of course, coffee? That would be lovely. She led him to the parlor, poured coffee, and sat across from him with the careful distance of someone expecting trouble. I'll be direct, Garrett said, settling into Cole's favorite chair with presumptuous ease. I know your husband refused my offer for his northern sections, but I thought perhaps you might see things differently. I'm not sure what you mean. Come now, Mrs. Dawson, you're a practical woman. I could see that at the social. You understand the value of security, of comfort. The amount I'm offering would set your family up for years. You could expand the house, hire more help, send young Luke to a proper school back east. My husband already refused your offer. Your husband is sentimental about land that's barely productive. Those northern sections are rocky, difficult to work. They're a burden, not an asset. Garrett leaned forward. But I'm willing to pay premium price because of the water rights. It's a good deal, Mrs. Dawson. Perhaps the best deal Cole will ever be offered. And you thought I would pressure him to accept that I came here from Missouri just to sell off his family's land? I thought you might help him see reason. A wife has influence in these matters. Eliza set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Mr. Garrett, I may have only been here a few months, but I understand something important. This land isn't just property, it's legacy. It's what Cole's father built, what he's maintained, what Luke will inherit. And you're asking me to help you take that away for money. I'm offering fair compensation. You're offering to take advantage of what you perceive as weakness. A new wife, a young son, the memory of loss. You think Cole might be vulnerable to pressure now. She stood. But you're wrong about him, and you're wrong about me. That land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Garrett's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Land values in this territory are volatile. In a few years, those sections might be worth half what I'm offering now. Then we'll manage with half. Thank you for the visit, Mr. Garrett, but I think it's time you left. He stood slowly, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Cole should choose his battles more carefully, and his allies. This territory is changing, Mrs. Dawson. Those who can't adapt get left behind. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who knows how things work out here. After he left, Eliza stood at the window and watched him ride away, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. She had just made an enemy, probably, but she couldn't bring herself to regret it. When Cole returned an hour later, she told him about the visit. His face went dark with fury. He came to my house, tried to go around me through you? He thought I'd be more amenable to his offer, that I'd pressure